wrist. A touch so light it could have been a dream, but it wasn't. My heart slammed against my ribs, and in the dim glow of my bedroom, I saw him, Ethan, my roommate, frozen beside my bed, his eyes wide with panic. Before I could speak, he bolted, leaving me tangled in sheets and questions that burned hotter than the Seattle summer outside. My name's Lucas Harper, 24, a graphic designer scraping by in a cramped Capitol Hill apartment. I'm black, wiry, with a habit of overthinking everything. Ethan Caldwell, 25, is the opposite, white, broad-shouldered, a barista with a laugh that fills rooms and a past he never talks about. We'd been roommates for 6 months, splitting rent and late-night takeout, our lives orbiting each other in comfortable chaos. Until that night. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment. His fingers had lingered, deliberate but soft, like he was tracing something precious. Why? Was it a mistake? A prank? My mind spun, caught between anger and something else. Something I didn't want to name. I'd always thought Ethan was straight, with his easy charm and the girls he'd bring to our game nights. But that touch, it felt like a secret unraveling. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, hunched over a coffee mug like it was his lifeline. His blonde hair fell into his eyes, and he wouldn't meet mine. "Ethan," I said, my voice sharper than intended. He flinched. "We need to talk." "I'm sorry," he mumbled, barely audible. "It was nothing. I was just checking if you were awake." "Checking?" I snapped, leaning against the counter. "At 2 a.m.? By touching my wrist." My pulse raced, not just from anger but from the memory of his fingers. Warm, careful, almost reverent. He looked up, his green eyes stormy. "Lucas, I didn't mean to freak you out. I swear. He trailed off, gripping the mug so hard I thought it'd crack. "Forget it. It won't happen again." But I couldn't forget. The air between us felt charged, like a storm about to break. I wanted answers, but Ethan clammed up, leaving for work without another word. The apartment felt too small after that, every creak of the floorboards a reminder of the night before. I tried to focus on my freelance projects, but my mind kept drifting to him. His quiet intensity, the way he'd linger in the doorway sometimes, like he wanted to say something but never did. Over the next few days, Ethan avoided me. He'd leave early, come home late, and when we did cross paths, he'd mutter excuses and vanish. It drove me crazy. I wasn't just mad, I was hurt. We'd been friends, or so I thought. We'd stayed up until dawn talking about everything from music to our worst fears. I told him about growing up in Atlanta, about the weight of being the only black kid in my art classes, about my dad's disapproval when I came out at 17. Ethan had listened, really listened, and shared pieces of himself too. How he'd grown up in a small Oregon town. How his mom's death when he was 15 left him unmoored. So why was he shutting me out now? By Friday, I'd had enough. I cornered him in the living room, where he was pretending to read a book. "Ethan, stop dodging me," I said, crossing my arms. "What happened that night? And don't give me that checking if you were awake bullshit." He closed the book, his hands trembling. "Lucas, I can't. You'll hate me." "Try me," I said, softer now, because the fear in his eyes was real. He stood, pacing the small room, his broad frame filling the space. "I wasn't thinking. I've been a mess lately. About you." His voice cracked, and he stopped, facing the window. "I didn't mean to touch you. I couldn't sleep, and I kept thinking about you, and I just wanted to be close." For a second, my breath caught. "Ethan, what are you saying?" He turned, his face raw with emotion. I'm saying I'm not who you think I am. I'm not straight. And I think I'm falling for you. The words hit like a tidal wave, washing away my anger and leaving me reeling. Ethan, the guy who'd teased me about my terrible cooking, who'd stayed up with me through a marathon of bad horror movies, was confessing something I'd never dared to imagine. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat was tight, my mind a jumble of shock and something warmer, something that scared me. I know it's messed up, he said, misreading my silence. I shouldn't have done it. I'll move out if you want. Just don't hate me, Lucas. I don't hate you, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I just need time to process this. He nodded, looking like he'd just lost something precious. Take all the time you need. That night I couldn't sleep. Ethan's confession echoed in my head, mingling with memories of his laugh, his kindness, the way he'd always made our tiny apartment feel like home. I'd never let myself think of him that way, too risky, too complicated. But now, knowing he felt something too, I couldn't ignore the pull in my chest. Was I falling for him too? And if I was, what did that mean for us? The next week was a tightrope walk. Ethan and I moved around each other like planets in uneasy orbits, careful not to collide. But every glance, every accidental brush of shoulders in our tiny kitchen felt like a spark threatening to ignite something bigger. I couldn't stop thinking about his confession. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he'd said them, raw and unguarded, like he'd been carrying that secret for years. I'd always prided myself on reading people, but I'd missed this. How long had Ethan been hiding who he was? And why did it make my heart ache to think of him carrying that weight alone? I tried to distract myself with work, sketching logos for a new client, but my thoughts kept drifting. I'd catch myself staring at Ethan's empty coffee mug on the counter or the hoodie he'd left on the couch, and I'd wonder, what did I feel? I'd been out since high school, but relationships had always been a minefield. My last boyfriend, a white guy named Ryan, had left me feeling like a token, his progressive love more about optics than me. I'd sworn off dating after that, focusing on my art and my independence. But Ethan, he was different. Or was he? One evening, I found him on the fire escape, staring out at the Seattle skyline. The city lights glittered below, a mix of neon and starlight. He didn't hear me approach, and for a moment, I just watched him. His broad shoulders hunched, his blonde hair catching the glow of a nearby street lamp. He looked so alone. Mind if I join you? I asked, leaning against the railing. He startled but nodded. Sure. We sat in silence for a while, the hum of the city filling the space between us. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Ethan, why didn't you tell me sooner? About, you know. He laughed, a bitter sound. What, that I'm gay? Or that I'm into you? He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't know how. I've spent my whole life pretending to be someone I'm not. Small-town Oregon isn't exactly a pride parade, you know. I nodded, thinking of my own childhood, the sideways glances in art class, the whispers about the gay black kid. I get it, but you could have trusted me. Could I? His voice was sharp, but his eyes were soft, searching. You're so together, Lucas. You're out, you're proud, you've got this life figured out. I'm still trying to catch up. Together. I laughed, shaking my head. Man, I'm a mess. I'm just good at hiding it. He smiled. A small, real smile that made my chest tighten. You hide it well, then. We talked for hours that night, the fire escape becoming our confessional. He told me about growing up in a conservative town, how he dated girls to fit in, how he'd buried his feelings so deep he barely recognized them. I shared my own fears about trusting again, about being seen for who I was, not just my race or my orientation. It was the most honest we'd ever been, and it felt like a door opening. The next day, I caught him humming while making breakfast, a habit I'd always found endearing. "You're in a good mood," I teased, grabbing a slice of toast. He shrugged, but his eyes sparkled. "Maybe I'm just glad we're talking again." That spark stayed with us. Over the next few weeks, the tension eased, replaced by something warmer. We'd watch movies, our knees brushing on the couch. He'd leave me coffee when I pulled all-nighters. I'd sketch him when he wasn't looking, capturing the curve of his jaw, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed. It was dangerous, this slow dance we were doing, but I couldn't stop. Then came the night that changed everything. We were at a local bar, celebrating a friend's birthday. The place was packed, all fairy lights and loud music. Ethan had a few drinks, his usual reserve melting away. He grabbed my hand, pulling me onto the dance floor, laughing like he didn't care who saw. I let him, my heart pounding as we moved together, closer than we'd ever been. His hand rested on my waist, his breath warm against my ear. "Lucas," he said, barely audible over the music, "I don't want to pretend anymore." Before I could respond, he kissed me. It was quick, desperate, like he was afraid I'd vanish. The world fell away. The bar, the music, the crowd, until it was just us, tangled in a moment that felt inevitable. When we pulled back, his eyes were wide, searching mine for rejection or acceptance. I didn't know what to say, so I kissed him back, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The kiss lingered in my mind like a song I couldn't stop humming. Ethan and I stumbled home that night, drunk on cheap beer and each other, our hands brushing as we walked through Seattle's misty streets. But the next morning, reality crashed in: doubt, fear, and the weight of what we'd done. I found Ethan in the kitchen, his back to me, scrubbing dishes like his life depended on it. "We should talk," I said, my voice unsteady. He turned, his face a mix of hope and dread. "Yeah, about last night." I cut him off. Was it a mistake? I hated how vulnerable I sounded, but I needed to know. I'd been burned before, and the thought of Ethan regretting that kiss made my stomach twist. "No," he said firmly, stepping closer. "It wasn't a mistake. But I'm scared, Lucas. I've never done this before. Not with a guy. Not like this." His honesty disarmed me. I wanted to be angry, to protect myself, but all I could see was the boy who'd carried his secrets alone for too long. "I'm scared too," I admitted, "but I don't want to stop whatever this is." He smiled, tentative but real, and we agreed to take it slow. Slow meant stolen glances over breakfast, late-night talks on the fire escape, and careful touches that set my skin on fire. But it also meant navigating the mess of our lives. Ethan was still figuring out who he was, and I was still healing from old wounds. We were a work in progress, but it felt right. Then came the email that threw everything into chaos. I was checking my inbox when I saw it. A message from Ryan, my ex, out of the blue. He was in Seattle for a tech conference and wanted to catch up. My stomach churned. Ryan had a knack for showing up when I was finally moving on, and his timing couldn't have been worse. I didn't tell Ethan at first. I didn't want to drag him into my past. But when Ryan texted me a few days later, asking to meet for coffee, I couldn't ignore it. I needed closure, or at least to prove to myself I was over him. So I went, meeting him at a sleek downtown cafe that screamed his new tech bro status. Ryan hadn't changed. Still blonde, still smug, still talking like he owned the world. "You look good, Lucas," he said, leaning back in his chair. Missed you. I didn't miss him, I realized. Not anymore. What do you want, Ryan? I asked, cutting through his charm. He leaned forward, his voice low. I messed up. I want another shot. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You had your shot. You blew it. He didn't like that. His smile faded, replaced by the manipulative edge I remembered too well. Come on, Lucas. You're still the same guy, stuck in that tiny apartment with some nobody roommate. You could do better. I stood, my chair scraping the floor. That nobody is worth 10 of you. I'm done here. I walked out, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and triumph. But when I got home, Ethan was waiting, his face pale. You went to see your ex? He asked, his voice tight. I froze. How did you know? I saw the text on your phone, he admitted, looking ashamed. I wasn't snooping, I swear. It just popped up. The air between us crackled with tension. You don't trust me? I asked, hurt. It's not that, he said, his voice breaking. I'm terrified of losing you. I've never felt like this before, and I don't know how to handle it. His vulnerability hit me hard. I crossed the room, taking his hands. Ethan, I don't want Ryan. I want you, but you've got to trust me. He nodded, his eyes glistening. I'm trying. I'm just new at this. We spent the rest of the night talking, laying bare our fears and hopes. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and for the first time I felt like we were building something real. Our relationship bloomed in quiet moments. A shared coffee on a rainy morning, a late-night walk through Pike Place Market, his hand warm in mine. But the world wasn't always kind to two guys falling in love, and Seattle, for all its progress, had its shadows. One evening, we were at a queer art event in Fremont, surrounded by vibrant murals and loud music. Ethan was nervous, his first time at something so openly queer. I squeezed his hand, trying to ease his tension, but then I saw them. A group of guys across the street, their stares hard and cold. One muttered something, and Ethan's grip tightened. Ignore them, I whispered, but my own pulse raced. I'd faced this before, hate dressed up as judgment, but it was Ethan's first time, and I could see the fear in his eyes. Let's go, he said, his voice low. We left, but the encounter lingered, a reminder that love, for us, came with a cost. Back home, Ethan was quiet, retreating to the fire escape. I followed, sitting beside him. You okay? I asked. He shook his head. I thought I was ready for this, being out, being with you. But those guys had brought me back to high school. The whispers, the looks. I took his hand, my thumb brushing his knuckles. I know, it's not fair, but you're not alone anymore. He looked at me, his eyes fierce. I want to be brave, Lucas. For you. For us. You already are, I said, and I meant it. Every step he took, coming out, kissing me, facing the world, was a kind of courage I admired. But courage was tested again when Ethan got a call from his dad. I overheard bits of it. Harsh words, disappointment, a demand to fix himself. When he hung up, he was shaking. He found out, he said, his voice hollow. Someone from home saw us together. He says I'm a disgrace. I pulled him into my arms, holding him as he broke down. You're not a disgrace, I said fiercely. You're incredible. And if he can't see that, it's his loss. Ethan clung to me, and in that moment, I knew I'd fight for him. For us, against anyone. But the fight wasn't just external. Ethan's doubts about himself, about whether he deserved this happiness, were a battle we faced together. I shared my own struggles, how I'd fought to love myself in a world that often didn't. We were both learning, growing, healing. One night, we went to a quiet park near Lake Union, the city lights reflecting on the water. Ethan stopped, pulling me close. "Lucas, I love you," he said, his voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. "I don't know if I'm doing this right, but I know I want you in my life." My heart swelled. "I love you too," I said, and we kissed under the stars, the world fading away. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Months passed, and our love grew stronger, but so did the challenges. Ethan started coming out to more people, friends, co-workers, and while some embraced him, others didn't. I watched him navigate the pain of rejection and the joy of acceptance, my heart swelling with pride. But the biggest test came when his dad showed up unannounced. It was a rainy Saturday when the knock came. Ethan opened the door, and there he was, Mr. Caldwell, a tall man with Ethan's green eyes but none of his warmth. "We need to talk," he said, barely glancing at me. Ethan let him in, his jaw tight. I stayed in the kitchen, giving them space but listening. The conversation was brutal. Accusations, guilt trips, demands for Ethan to come home and fix this. I wanted to storm in to defend him, but this was his fight. Finally, Ethan's voice rose, steady and clear. "Dad, I'm not broken. I'm gay, and I'm in love with Lucas. If you can't accept that, you don't get to be in my life." The silence that followed was deafening. Mr. Caldwell left without another word, and when Ethan turned to me, his face was a mix of grief and relief. I held him, whispering, "I'm so proud of you." That moment marked a turning point. Ethan started therapy, working through years of shame and fear. I joined him sometimes, unpacking my own baggage. We were messy, imperfect, but we were in it together. One evening, we went back to the park where we'd first said, "I love you." The sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, and Ethan pulled out a small sketchbook. "I found this in your room," he said, grinning. "You've been drawing me." I flushed. "Yeah, well, you're a good subject." He handed me the sketchbook, open to a new page. In his messy handwriting, he'd written, "Lucas, you're my home. Marry me?" I froze, my heart racing. "Ethan, I mean it," he said, his voice trembling but sure. "I want forever with you." Tears stung my eyes as I nodded. "Yes." We kissed, the world soft and bright around us. It wasn't a fairy tale. There'd be more fights, more doubts, more hate to face, but we'd face it together. Ethan's touch that night, the one that had startled me awake months ago, had been the start of something I never expected. A love that was raw, real, and worth every risk. As we stood there, wrapped in each other, I realized that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead to the most beautiful truths. We weren't just roommates anymore. We were partners, lovers, home.